another episode of the Eddie Donan Show. I am here with my guest today, Sogol Monfared. She is the director of the New Developments Division at ReMax Hallmark. Sogol, how are you?
I thank you so much for having me. I know we tried to do this a few times, 3 times to be exact. So
Third time's a charm, yeah.
Yeah. Very excited to be here. Thank you for having me. Yes.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for being here. And Sogol is the go-to girl for pre-construction. Tell us a little bit about yourself. How long have you been in the industry and how long have you been specializing in new construction?
Sure. So I got into real estate about 22 years ago, and about 7 years in, I found out that my passion really is new developments, land assembly, pre-construction, sales, marketing, all of that. And it's been such an amazing journey ever since.
So you started as a baby then?
Pretty much. I was 3 years old. Yeah, 22, 3, 25.
That's great. So you have a lot of experience. You've seen so much happening in these last 20 years.
I've seen a few markets come and go for sure, and have had an opportunity to work with many different prominent developers, and I have learned so much. It's been definitely interesting to say the least.
Yeah, it's a nice journey.
Yeah.
And let me ask you, what made you get into real estate? How did you decide to get into the real estate world?
It's a very funny story. So I sort of fell into it. I got into it, and I haven't told this story to anyone.
All right.
I was in university, and I was going to ski with some of my friends. I got into a very bad car accident. And afterwards, because of the injuries that I had, I wasn't allowed to go back to class.
Oh, wow.
So for 6 months, I had to take it easy. During that time, my uncle, my mom's brother, he suggested that, why don't you read these books? You'll get a license. And I was studying psychology at that time. Study these, and whenever we want to buy something, at least, you'll have something to fall back on.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, great, right? And I'm a bookworm, and I love reading. If you come to my house, my walls are, covered in books. So I studied. I got my license, and make a long story short, in the first couple of years as I was going to school, a few family members, they want to buy pre-con, and they're like, if you sign here, they'll give you money. I'm like, okay.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
So I got started there, and then I see that, the flexibility at that time.
Right.
And the income was just so great. It got me going because I was very young. But then I eventually saw that, wow, it has such amazing potential. It's so rewarding in so many ways. And then I started professionally and full-time. And now we're here today.
Now you're here. Yeah, time flies.
Yeah,
Very similar story to mine, actually. There's a lot of parallels there. So that's kind of crazy. I fell into it as well while I was studying psychology.
Stop it.
Yeah. So
I've known you for a while, and I had no idea.
Yeah, so that's kind of how it evolved, and then here I am now.
You study psychology.
Later. Yep. So that's what I was studying in university.
We have more in common than
yes, and then when I was during the summer months it was.
Okay.
And back then, remember, you can get your license fairly fast if you
3 courses, boom, boom, boom.
So it was very fast. So I decided to do it, and then I started selling. I got lucky because everyone gets a little bit lucky at the beginning.
True. Your cousin buys, your neighbor buys.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
You think it's easy.
Yeah. And then here I am now.
Well, you are pretty incredible. I've had a privilege, truly, to be working with you closely for the past while. And I must say that if I wasn't in business and I want to buy a home, I would 100% go to you.
Wow, what a compliment.
Truly, the amount of research and work and knowledge and everything that you put into it, it is...
Oh, that's very nice. That means a lot coming from a professional like yourself.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. But we're here to let everyone know about pre-construction, right? Because you're an expert on this, and I figured who else better than yourself to explain it.
Yes.
Right? So pre-construction, everyone's heard about it, but not everyone knows about it. Not every realtor knows about it.
Yeah.
So can you tell us very basically what's pre-construction?
Sure. It's a niche, right? And it is a great way for some to either be able to get in the market or to be able to invest further without being so hands-on, right? And it's very important for those consumers who are looking to do so to ensure they're working with a professional who has this skill set. So not just any realtor who, for example, is in strictly resale or strictly commercial, and they don't have a lot of experience in pre-construction. It's a completely different branch of the industry. So it's important for consumers to pick and choose the professional that they're going to be working with. But I must say, I am an advocate of buying pre-con and keeping it long-term in Canada and our beautiful province of Ontario. However, it's not for everyone.
Of course.
Right? Depending on each person's desired budget, timeline, vision, and their definition of investment, it could be great for some and not suitable for others.
Right. So who's it for? So let's say who's the target client for this? Who's the generally buying pre-construction
So
right now?
pre-construction, it provides the buyer, if you're looking for whatever reason not to get a mortgage right now, whether if you're not approved, or if you already have one or two and you don't want another one added at this time, or if the rates are too high, for example,
rates.
like our current market,
Right.
but you would like to secure, today or tomorrow's price, but buy, something that closes in average, let's say 4 years from now, right? So also talking about pre-construction, I must mention that our rental market currently, at least, and for the past 2 decades, it has been being maintained, but mostly by our investors, right? Because as we all know, unfortunately, our government either hasn't been in a situation to do so, or just doesn't have the programming, at least yet, for it. And if it wasn't for our investors to purchase multiple units and then have them on the rental market, we would be in a very different position in Toronto, at least.
Yeah, I agree. And the rental market is just crazy. There's such a shortage. There's so many immigrants coming in. And whenever we go to an event, we hear different figures, 500,000, a million, 1.2 million per year. But there's a lot of people coming in and we have a shortage of housing. And I guess that's the bottom line with Toronto real estate or Canada real estate as a whole, is that we have a shortage of housing and we have population that's coming in, consistently growing. And where do they go?
You nailed it. And unfortunately, what is happening is because of the interest rates and everything that happened in the market within the past 12 months, some of our amazing developers, they have stepped back and they're not building. So that's going to cause even a bigger shortage in the market. So come end of 25, beginning of 26, we're going to see a bit of a crunch in terms of supply and demand. Like you nailed it, right? That's where our market ends and begins, right? And with the numbers coming in and us already being short in supply, at least for the next decade or 15 years, with the new numbers, we're going to be in a worse position also.
Yeah, and I want to talk about that a little bit later on, about why builders have paused a little bit, right? But let's go back to the ideal buyer. So let's say I'm a younger couple or young investor, somebody looking to get into the market, and they feel pre-construction is the way to go. What should they be looking out for? How do they choose a project? Like, walk me through the decision-making process.
So the first thing they do, they must pick someone who knows the city and the projects available, as well as the market, right? We have many projects opening every month. Not every project is profitable, unfortunately. And in every profitable project, not every unit is going to be profitable. So it takes some logistics and knowing profit margins, supply and demand in that submarket, and a lot more information for the agent to be able to do the due diligence and guide that couple or that individual based on their goals accordingly. For example, you come to me and you say, Sogol, I want to buy a 1-bedroom. My first 3 questions for you would be, why are you buying? The reason, what is your goal? Are you an end user? Do you want it for, let's say, your children who are going to be going to university in 4 years? Are you looking to rent it out? And based on your answer, my selection for you will be very different, right? If you're an investor, obviously based on the budget you have, I'm going to place you in a submarket that will give you the most amount of money. However, if you're an end user, or if there's a specific reason you're buying, let's say for your kids who want to go to university, then we are restricted to certain areas. So your reason will count your reason will be very important.
Makes sense.
Second would be, what is your desired budget, right? Yeah. So as we know, currently in our market, you can make a purchase with even sometimes 5% down payment, but usually your average deposit required is about 15 to 20%. And we want to make sure that you have that readily available plus closing costs. So depending on the figure you give me, then I will know which submarkets are going to be within your desired budget. And last but not least, the third one is your timeline. So you may say, Sogol, I want to buy it and forget about it. It's going to be sitting there paying itself off. Great, then my hands are open. But if you let me know that, listen, we need to move in 2 years, then we have to go into a low rise. If you don't want to get a mortgage for the next 5 years, I'm going to take you to a super high rise. So depending on these 3 answers, then I can guide you better.
I think it's a very good point because I find a lot of my clients, they come to me and they say, well, such and such bought in this project, so I want to buy there, right? Or they made money here, or they're buying here, this is so popular. But a lot of people don't understand that it really has to suit your own needs. It kind of sounds cliche when you tell a client that it's whatever's best for you,
Yeah.
but it really is.
It
Because
really
you mentioned,
is.
right? Everyone's timeline's different. Everyone's budget is different. Everyone's risk tolerance is different too, right? So
Everyone's definition of the word investment is
yeah,
different.
100%. So that's
Yeah.
what I see. A lot of people, even if relatives have bought in a building, I might not necessarily see them that way because it might be the wrong building for them.
100%.
Now, as far as builders and developers, there's a lot out there. And we hear in the news, not to mention any names, but I hear some of them have gone into receivership. Some projects are not getting built. I'm guessing that's part of the risk of investing pre-construction. But how do you minimize that as a buyer? How do you avoid making a mistake like that?
To be honest with you, I would again go back to the same point. Pick a professional who knows the industry well, like yourself, because we are in it day in, day out. And I'm very happy to say at ReMax Hallmark, from the past 3 years or so that we started working on this division together, we haven't had any of our partner developers to go into any kind of cancellation receivership. Not just that, these projects have been highly profitable and our buyers have been very happy.
Yeah, that's great because sometimes you hear these stories and that's one of the main
It's
reasons that
definitely out
people
there.
feel like, okay, where should I buy? One advice that I always give people, and we've talked about it before, is that cheaper is not always better,
No.
especially with you have some new developers that they drop their prices significantly and it's sometimes too good to be true and it ends up being too good to be true.
It is. And also, I'll give you an example. So, and we're not going to name anyone, obviously,
Of course.
they, respectfully, they each have their own business
Yeah.
plan, and that's understandable. We have developers who sell for a lot cheaper per square foot, and it attracts buyers, right? But at the end of the day, you got to see what's in their contract. And these contracts are outside of the scope of any consumer's expertise, and it has to be reviewed by a specialized lawyer.
Right.
Within these contracts, you will see that there are so many open-ended costs that could potentially, if you've bought, let's say, a unit for $1,000 per square foot, potentially you've bought at $1,250 and you don't know it.
Wow.
Because you're going to get a big bill at the end when it comes closing time for tens of thousands of dollars that has to go towards paying for levies and development costs and so on and so forth. So again, going back to
Yeah.
our point, highly important to work with a professional who is a specialist when it comes to pre-construction like yourself.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. Not everyone knows the ins and outs. They don't know the developers. They don't know the floor plans, what you talked about, right? What's unit is
Yeah.
more profitable, what's going to rent better. There's a lot of intricacies with it. And one of the things that I personally like to do is I always look at the location of the project. Location has to be key, right?
Location,
It has to make
location,
sense
location.
because I know you and I have talked about projects that are being built, but they don't make sense in that particular location. So it has to make sense. Location has to make sense. But what we were talking about earlier is the reputation of the developer. Like I find that a lot of the big names, they're gonna build, they're gonna get it done because it's their reputation. That's how they, maintain themselves in business for so many years. So you really have to be
100%.
looking out for a reputable developer that's gonna, fulfill what they promised. And price per square foot is not always it's not
The
always the norm.
determining factor.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when it comes to reputation, integrity, and also knowing, again, from the relationships that we have with these guys, knowing their pipeline, for those who are in it for the long run, let's say they've been building for 50 years, they are there to build at least for another 100 years.
Wow.
If the market changes and they lose on one project or two within this time period, they're not going to ruin their reputation and not go through with it, but because they know they will make it comes next year or the year after. And they keep that advocacy with consumers, which is worth more than anything else to them.
Right. I see developers say that they have the same clients buying and buying
Some
units.
do.
Yeah, in the same project. That speaks a lot. It speaks volume. It's like a referral
I
for
mean,
us, right?
for sure.
Yeah.
That's exactly what I was going to say, Eddie, right? So just like when you were working on the resale side and you are fantastic the way like your client experience and expertise and they make a lot of money, they send you more clients. It's the same thing with developers,
Right.
right?
So we know that buying pre-construction is a completely different process, really, than resale, right?
It is.
In resale, you get to go in, you get to see the house, you get to breathe it, smell it, look at its imperfections, everything, right? With pre-con, I find it challenging at first because you're just looking at a piece of paper in a presentation center. Sometimes in our office,
Yes.
not even in the presentation.
Sometimes emailing it.
Emailing it right from your phone. So it's a different process, right? You mentioned it's a different agreement of purchase and sale. our resale agreement of purchase and sale is like 6 to 8 pages, pretty standard clauses, right? So you won't really get lost in it. But if it's your first time reading an agreement of purchase and sale for a pre-con, you can get lost.
It's
Like,
on average, I would say it's about 40 legal pages,
right,
much smaller font, front and back.
right, yeah, of course. So you have that, but there's protection for the consumers, right? That's what we explain to them. So
Yes, they are protected. Once, let's say, the purchaser picks and chooses the unit that fits in their budget, they like the floor plan, and everything makes sense. What happens is they sign the agreement of purchase and sale. However, they have 10 days, not 10 business days, 10
10 days,
days,
right? Important difference, yeah.
to have this contract reviewed by a real estate lawyer. And the real estate lawyer can make sure to speak with the client about any terms that are of concern, if there are any open-ended costs, and if there's anything to worry about in general. And within those 10 days, if it doesn't make sense, consumers can cancel the contract without any penalty, without any deduction, and walk away. They are not. They do not need to give a reason when canceling. You can have a bad dream and say, I don't want it. So they do have that 10 days that protects them, and they can run their due diligence.
Because another point too, right? Right now we're seeing, in today's market, we're seeing a lot of assignments. Right?
Correct.
And I think that happens, it's happened. There's a reason for it, right? Interest rates, when these guys were buying the units 4 or 5 years ago, the interest rates were at 2%. And now it's time for closing and you're close to 6, 7, 8%, depends if you go with a B lender, right? But a lot of the times I find people that they don't plan to close at all. They just come to you, I want to get 2, 3 units. I have $500 available, $500,000 available in a line of credit, buy so many, but they're not planning. I don't understand. They're not planning to close.
I guess as a human, all of us, it's very easy for us to get lost in excitement, and when the market is very hot and there are all these, great projects being marketed, to over leverage yourself, right? And stress yourself. And those, again, unfortunately, who didn't work, and every case that I see coming to ReMax Hallmark, from other, professionals and other brokerages, unfortunately, coming to us and say, hey, I'm stuck, I worked with so-and-so, and this is where I stand right now. We go back and we see, due diligence was not done. Right. This person didn't qualify from day one. Yeah. And there was one poor lady, she had bought 7 units, Eddie. And all the information she had received was inaccurate, unfortunately, and she was in tears. And if you are not consulting with a pre-construction expert, not only you stand to lose the deposit you've paid, but also you stand to be sued by the developer for damages.
Of course.
So very important, again, to consult with an expert.
Yeah, you got to keep that in mind, is that a lot of people think like, I'll just lose my deposit. Is going to walk away from it.
That does not.
But if you read all the lawsuits that are coming out now, right? Because when the market shifts, people walk away and then they're getting sued, and you're starting to see the lawsuits that were back in 2017. There's massive losses.
Massive
800,000 in one case. Right, developer got.
Amounts,
so it's huge amounts, right?
I'm happy to say the assignment market it has pretty much cleaned up. So there's no more blood in the water. It's been a few weeks now. And those that are in the assignment market right now, they are looking for a little bit of profit as they see rate cuts coming, and everyone's, a little bit more optimistic. But at the time of purchase, it's so important. Incentives are great, and whatever bells and whistles you're getting with it, but you are marrying the purchase price,
right?
And you've got to make sure you're not overstretching yourself.
Yeah, that's the main thing. Is like if you have a good professional in your corner, I always advise my clients it's really good to get excited, because sometimes we post something on Instagram and 5% down, 5% deposit, and everyone's like, yeah, something on it, but then that's the only 5% you have. You're gonna have to come up with another 5% next year. Where's that coming from?
100%.
You really have to plan out, and you have to see it through. You can't, it's not just about securing the contract and coming up with deposits. Eventually, the builder's going to knock on your door and say, like, hey, unit's done, we have to close.
Exactly. And like you mentioned, the process is very different, right? So it's a longer process. So yes, it is fantastic. It gives you extra time to plan and make sure that you are ready. If you're supposed to liquidify some assets, sell something, you're getting a gift from someone, so on and so forth. But you got to know from day one your closing costs.
Right.
And that's what we do for our clients,
Yeah.
right? To make sure that they're ready. It's not just, as you said, the 5% or the 5% next year. You have closing costs that are very different drastically from resale. And also, you know that we hold their hands throughout the 4 years
course.
until comes closing time and beyond.
Beyond.
So it's a process.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah.
Two things that I want to talk about during that process. So, number one is occupancy. So, for those that don't know, like pretty much everyone that's buying pre-construction for the first time, they have no idea what occupancy is.
Correct.
So, tell us about it.
So when you're buying a resale property, there's one day that you get your keys, your mortgage starts if you have a loan, and off you go and you move in. With pre-construction, there's one stop before your final
Right.
closing, and that is occupancy. So developers usually must give keys, hand over keys and possession to purchasers 75% of the building before they can get the building registered.
Right.
While they're doing that, imagine if you're on the 3rd floor and the building is 50 floors, you got to wait for a few weeks or possibly a few months. And nothing is free in this life,
Right.
as
Yes,
we know.
of course.
So during that time, you're going to be paying something, I guess we can compare it to rent. Right?
So where
You're
everyone
paying
is,
that, you're paying
paying
that to the developer, which is sort of equivalent to an amount based on that times rate, interest rate, and the amount you owe the developer. So if you've
Right.
paid 20% already, 80% of the purchase price at the rate of that time,
Right.
On top of that, there's maintenance fee and then prorated property tax.
Right.
So this is going to be your monthly payment until you take over. And if you are already a property owner and you have obligations on a monthly basis towards other mortgages, this is something that you've got to plan for. Either you can ask to have the right to rent during occupancy,
Right.
so you don't have to carry that cost, or you have to have a cushion bank account somewhere to make sure that you can have that covered.
Yeah. You'd be surprised. Well, so many people come to you and then they don't realize that. Right, they bought somewhere else, and they come and they have to pay occupancy or rent to the builder. That's what they call it all the time, and they have no idea that was going to happen.
They don't.
So you have to be very careful with that.
And the rates, Eddie. So let's say we just a couple of weeks ago closed a couple of units around $1.2 million, and occupancy fee for these at that time 4 or 5 years ago when we bought it, it was quoted at $3,000 something.
Right.
Currently, it's about $8,000.
That's insane. That's insane. Yeah.
So many wouldn't be ready for it.
Yeah,
right.
they're not ready for it.
Yeah, it's important to, if you're a realtor, it's very important to keep in touch with your clients as the market changes and make sure that they are prepared. Yeah. And if you're a consumer, hopefully you've picked someone who is an expert and you're prepared.
Yeah,
already.
so many things. And it also depends on the size of the building too and what floor you happen to be in, because I've seen periods of months for occupancy.
True.
Right?
I mean, there are developers that are amazing, and your occupancy to your closing maybe at most is about 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And then there are those that goes on for months.
Yeah.
And they're within their rights, by
Of
the way.
course. Of course. That's something that once you read the contract, you see how many
find
rights the
out.
builder has and how few we have as consumers. But that's just
Yeah.
life, right?
But playing devil's advocate, they do take a very
course.
high risk. There's just millions involved, and each person has to protect their own. And we do have a chance again within those 10 days to review the contract and make sure that is it for us or is it not, right?
And the second big one, so regarding pre-construction, the closing costs. So when we're doing resale, we have obviously our legal fees, we have land transfer tax. It's huge, but with pre-con, you have one other one that's fairly big, which is your
development charges. We call it DC in the biz.
Yeah, the lingo.
So yeah, exactly. So there's development charges, but also there are several levies, such as park levies or community levies, and so on. However, again, working with an expert, this is mostly negotiable with those who are at a VIP or a platinum level with a developer like yourself, right? And at the time of purchase, before your 10 days are over, that is when we can go to the developer and say, we want to negotiate. Can you waive this levy, or can you cap this cost for us so we know exactly, almost exactly how much we face on closing? But you're absolutely right. So just to give you a figure, besides land transfer tax and legal fees, for downtown Toronto, for a one-bedroom apartment, you're looking at maybe about $17,000 to $20,000 development charges, and maybe under $4,000 for park levies.
Right. It's crazy.
That's a lot of
Those
money.
expensive parks, right?
Yes.
But what we do a lot of time is that we cap it. We ask the builder to cap it, right?
That's
At a certain
correct.
amount. So as you said, they have certainty that they're not going to go over that.
We negotiate it and then we put a cap on it. And at times we're able to have it waived.
Right.
Mhm.
Because essentially what the contract, if you were just to walk into a sales center and sign it, they're pretty much saying that any expense that the city, municipality, province passes on to them on top of what they're charging you,
That's correct.
it's on you as a buyer.
It is. And let's remember those professionals who are working at these presentation
Yeah.
centers, they're employed by the developer and they have
Yes.
obligations towards the developer, but they're not there necessarily to go above and beyond and protect the consumer because, again, they're employed by the developer. So it is in consumers' best interest to find an expert in pre-construction. Doesn't cost them anything.
Mhm.
And I would say 99.9% of the time, there is no discount if you go to these developers directly.
Right.
So really, you're just leaving yourself vulnerable, and it is not safe.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. It's a different, even buying resale. I always think you should have somebody in your corner. You should have a buyer's
Absolutely.
agent. If you're listing it, you should have somebody working for you, and they should each work separately, right? And come together and do a deal. But for pre-cons, most of the people don't have a clue of what we're
No,
talking
yeah,
about.
for
so
some
it's
reason,
different.
the perception is that, oh, well, I'm just buying from a builder. Why do I need a realtor? But exactly what you said, resale, commercial, pre-construction, each to its own. And if you pick a professional who is well-versed in rules, regulations, where you can negotiate, reputation, agreements, all of that, then you're in a much safer place.
And I also think that, yes, the realtor, but the lawyer as well.
100%.
Because I've seen lawyers look over pre-con contracts, and they're not specialists in pre-con. They're great.
I'm glad you brought that
they're
up.
great resale lawyers,
Mhm.
but then they look at something and they're either gonna advise the client wrong because they think everything there
Yeah.
is a ripoff, or they're just not gonna know what to look for. Either way, the client's losing, right? So
Yeah.
the realtor should be a specialist in pre-con, but also the guy who's reading over the contract should have a pretty good idea.
100%. I was complimenting you on your hair when
Yeah.
I arrived. So, it's like if I have, eyesight issues, I go to a skin doctor. They're both professionals, both doctors, but their expertise are
Right.
different. So if you go to a real estate lawyer, some real estate lawyers are unfamiliar with terms, conditions, and agreements of developers and builders.
Yeah.
So they flag everything when when it's completely standard, right? And we've unfortunately lost deals over that, great deals that the
Yeah.
buyer would have made a lot of money just because the lawyer didn't know what he or she was talking about, unfortunately.
And the thing is, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah,
And if you tell them, they get upset because they're professionals, they're a
True.
lawyer, right?
true.
But they don't know what they don't know. And I've seen it both ways. I've seen buyers lose great deals because of the
Yes.
wrong advice from the lawyer, and I've also seen them walk into horrible deals because the lawyer. It goes in both extremes. He took the
Yes.
other way, and he's like, everything's fine. The builder
Absolutely.
wrote this. It's okay, and then
Yeah.
it's crazy, right?
But I think this whole conversation, we keep going back to go to experts who know that specific field. Just because your friend or someone you know is in that field or similar, don't rely on those relationships for such important matters. This is there's a lot of money on the table
Yeah.
when you're making a purchase, right?
A lot.
So it's important to get expert advice for sure.
Yeah, and that's the reason. Like for myself, and I know for you, we have a team of professionals, right? A legal team. We know who
We
to
do.
refer you.
Mhm.
That's partnered with ReMax Hallmark. You guys have done
Mhm.
such a great job at building
Corman and
those
Company.
relationships
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and providing clients with access to these things that otherwise wouldn't be so easy to do.
Exactly. Well said.
Yeah. Well, Sogol, I don't think I'm forgetting anything. I think we covered
I
just
thought I
about
was not going to
everything.
be able to talk this much, but it was just, it
know
went
it's-
by like that.
It's very
And it was a lot of
informative.
fun.
It's very informative. Finally, just to end off, what advice would you have to somebody that's considering? I know you said look for an expert, look for somebody who specializes in the field.
Yeah,
But what other advice would you have for somebody that's considering investing in pre-construction?
for sure. So after attending many fantastic conferences by prominent economists like Benjamin Tal,
Yeah.
Chief Operating Officer of CIBC, and more, I seem to hear the same advice chiming through these guys that says if you want to buy, you have a window of 6 months.
Right.
And once the rates start getting cut, then all these incentives and great prices are going to go away. And because of the influx of population and low supply, prices are going to go nowhere else but up. So if you're looking to purchase, I would say get in touch with your designated professional who's an expert in pre-con and take a look at the many fantastic opportunities that exist in today's market, because you can make a lot of money. Just don't overstretch yourself.
Yeah, you got to be careful. I agree with you, because I think people forget that just a few years ago, people were lining up to buy units.
And I did. We'll go back to that in a couple of years.
We'll go back to that, right? Because what happens is the resale market will start heating up. Everything's going to go with 15, 20 offers. It's already happening. I've had listings that have had 15 offers. And then the consumer pushes the button and says, you know what, forget it. I'm going to go buy pre-con. And then that starts to flood up again. And then the developers are releasing small number of units. People are lining up for it. So there is the same type of
100%,
demand, if not more, for the project. So right now you're in a window of opportunity that things haven't been as hot. Developers are doing more incentives for their clients, but that's eventually going to come to an end. It's just basic numbers. You keep on getting a million people coming in here. Eventually that's going to stop.
Yeah.
And one other point that I actually wanted to ask you, what's your take on this? Because I have a lot of people that say, well, pricing's too high. Like we have buildings right now, let's say going for $1,400 a square foot. And let's say a comparable resale model is going for $1,000 or $1,200, whatever the figure is.
Yeah.
So there's a difference.
For sure. So the gap between resale and pre-construction right now, it's pretty drastic.
Yeah.
However, again, going back to supply and demand and the pockets, the submarkets that you choose. And if we, again, going back to, the expert who's going to be assisting you, you can see, okay, what are the profit margins annually on average for that pocket, and when is it going to catch up? Now, I also want to mention that real estate market, Eddie, you and I know it's a long-term game. We're not in stock market. We're like buy and flip in a year or two. There are taxes. It just doesn't work that way, right? So if you are in it for long-term, and for pre-construction, my suggestion to my clients has always been, think of it as a 10-year project. From the day you purchase it, 4 to 5 years, you take over and you keep it for 5 years. Then if you're thinking of selling, great. But mostly in real estate also, build portfolios.
Of course.
Right? I learned this from a great friend over a decade ago, Avi Galina, shout out, that buy and keep, right? And when you're doing that, if you're thinking of it as a 10-year plan, that gap, not only it closes, but you will get many folds over.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. Everything should be long-term. That's what we were talking about before, not preparing to close, right? Not just a short-term type of thing. And another thing to that point regarding pricing, people think that pricing will go down in pre-construction, right? We hear it all the time, and it's true, that there's a very low profit margin right now for the builders. I'm not going to say low, but it's a margin. They're not making $1,000 a square foot themselves. They have to acquire the land. They have to pay the trades. They have to pay for material. They have to pay for permits. So there's really not a lot of room for them to cut pricing unless it's a profit, and they're not going to work for free.
It goes back to the importance of working with those who are in it long term, and they do not mind having a smaller profit margin currently, because they know that once the market goes back to what it was in a little bit, then they're going to make that money. These are all, this kind of information is not really consumers' job to know. It is you and I,
like
it's ours.
Secret,
Exactly.
So they come to us when
and
they know
it's
something.
exactly. So it could be a little bit boring for them, but you and I know where to go and what to pick and choose based on their budget, so that there is the lowest amount of risk and the highest leverage and profit, hopefully.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
Sogol, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. I've been, as you said before, I've been trying to get you in here for a very long time, and I think this has been a great conversation. Thank you for your time and your expertise. Honestly, learning from you and having those many years of experience, and I have access to it. It's great for me and for my clients. So.
Thank you so much. Thanks for your patience, and thank you for not giving up on me. And this was a lot more fun. I was very nervous. I haven't been at any podcasts, and honored, and thank you so much.
You've done great. It's very informative. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And guys, thank you very much for watching Sogol Monfared. You can follow her on Instagram or social media.
This guy rocks. Call him.
Thank you.